Good evening, everyone. I'm Mayor Beverly H. Burks, and this is the May 27, 2025 Clarkston City Council work session. I'll start with roll call. Vice Mayor Johnson, Councilman Carroll, Councilwoman Bell, Councilman Perkins, Councilwoman McGee, and Councilwoman Wood. Are there any updates changes to the agenda? Hearing none, the agenda is accepted by common consent. We're moving to item 3, which is public comments. Any member of the public may address questions or comments to the city council in reference to only agenda items that the mayor and the council have an opportunity to discuss the agenda item. Each attendee will be allowed 3 minutes for comments. This time will be a the business will have to be A to proclamation that the to discuss proclamation designated as 5 months, and that was done by Yolanda.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members, and our very own city manager, Millie Thornton. So, we're going to start in Pride Month. Pride Month, celebrated in June, commemorates the Stonewall Rioters of 1969.
I'm going to pause you. The first one is Caribbean, so we want to do it in order. Thank you.
The Caribbean Pride Month. The month was founded by Dr. Claire Nelson and was celebrated across the nation for the first time by the Institute of Caribbean Studies in 2000. However, the move to officially declare June as National Caribbean American Month started in 2004 when a legislative bill was passed by Congresswoman Barbara Lee. The resolution was made official in 2006 when President George W. Bush signed the proclamation naming June as National Caribbean American Heritage Month. During this month, acknowledgement regarding the contribution of the Caribbean to the forefront. The people are also reminded of the great Caribbean cuisine, their music, and the majestic annual parade of the Caribbean Americans. This is the time of year when the country is given a blast from the past, topped with a lot of entertainment. So, welcome to the Caribbean National Heritage Month. We are excited. Next, moving on to Pride Month.
I just want to make sure we have this council question. Right. Public question. All right, consent. All right. Yes.
Pride Month. Pride Month, celebrated in June, commemorates the Stonewall Riots of 1969 and recognizes the ongoing fight of the LGBTQ plus equality and acceptance. It's time to honor the contribution of LGBTQ plus individuals throughout history, celebrate progress, and advocate for continued inclusion and justice. Pride Month also serves as a reminder that while progress has been made, there's still work to be done in achieving full equality for all LGBTQ people. And that is all. Are there any questions?
Okay. Council, any comments? Any questions? Public, any comments? Any questions? Consent? Consent. Thank you. Thank you again.
You're welcome. Have a great evening.
You're great. So we don't have anything for 5. We'll move now into 6A, which is to discuss the 2025 preliminary digest and consider a tentative 2025 millage rate for advertising purposes. City Manager Miller Thornton.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Mayor. I did present to council a memorandum providing some detail of the millage rate of the digest versus budget versus millage rate analysis for 2025. On May 16th, 2025, the tax assessors did present preliminary digest consolidation and evaluation of the digest for 2025 with a net maintenance and operations digest of $404,337,835. On page one of the memorandum sent to council dated May 22nd, it was presented that the preliminary digest represents a 3.22 increase in real property value, and a 7.46 increase in personal property value for 2025. These percentages represent a change in real property digest of $12,197,908 from $377,656,644 in 2024 to $389,854,552 in 2025. In 2024, Clarkston adopted a mill rate of 13.890. The mill rate that will render the same amount of as-billed revenue in 2025 as billed in 2024 is called the rollback rate. Upon calculation of the rollback rate, it has been determined that the rollback rate is 13.664 mills. Please note that the rollback rate is lower than the most recently adopted rate of 13.890. Tables 1 and 2 on page 2 show the digest comparisons at the current rate of 13.890 mills and the rollback rate of 13.664 mills. This particular table also provides the estimated revenue at the collection rate. Currently, the city's collection rate is 82% for real property taxes. So as shown, at a current mill rate of 13.890, the revenue to be estimated or collected as billed is $5,830,028, which is $473,351 less than budgeted for 2025. At the collection rate of 82% and at a rate of 13.890 mills, as collected, the revenue is $1,432,561 less than budgeted for 2025. I do want to say that the revenue, the analysis for this year does include two things that have not been previously, I believe, considered during millage rate adoption. One is the appeals differential, because at presentation of the digest, you do have properties that are in appeal, right? Which means that while they are in appeal, they will only be taxed on the previous year's value, right? So any increase in value will not be realized by the city until those properties have been satisfactorily determined that the current rate is the correct rate for those properties. Based on analysis, it has been determined that the appeals differential value is 5.8%, which is $22,611,564 of the digest, reducing the real property digest to $367,242,988. On page 5 of the memo I presented to council, the village rate that would produce the same amount of revenue as billed, that mill rate would need to be 15.953 mills. as billed. So the revenue for 15.953 mills is $6,303,535, which is $156 in excess of the amount budgeted. As collected, the mill rate would need to be 19.298 mills, with revenue being $6,303,566, which is $187 in excess of budget as adopted. So the purpose of tonight's meeting is to determine the mill rate that will be advertised per regulations and per the tax payers bill of rights. It's mandatory that the city advertise its proposed mill rate with some additional information about 5-year history and about the amount of increase that an increase would impose on both non-homestead and homestead properties. It is the recommendation of the administration that, again, 19.298 mills will produce the amount of revenue as budgeted and as collected. 15.953 mills will produce the amount as billed. So that assumes 100% collection of taxes, which we are far from that. We're about 20% off from that. So I recommend a mill rate no less than 15.953 mills, which means that it would be incumbent upon the administration, city departments to either present budget cuts in the amount of a little bit over $1 million, or for council to consent to those monies being taken from the city's general fund reserve.
All right, thank you, city manager, for bringing that. I'll let the council start with any comments or questions at this time, or making sure in terms of next council meeting that we will vote on the actual amount.
No, we have to have consent tonight.
Tonight?
It goes, yes, ma'am.
Okay,
We
all right.
put the advertisement in the newspaper.
Okay, so that's why I want to make sure this. Okay, yes, Councilman Carroll?
So I have a question. So you said 82% is the normal collection rate. Do we know how much of that 18% that's missing is appeals lost versus people that are just late in paying?
Well, appeals is a separate differential altogether,
Okay.
right? And so, from the preliminary analysis that I've done, I found that there in the previous year, which is all I've had time to do an analysis on, is that our apartment complexes are typically late in payment. That's not all of them, but some of them, which is a substantial amount of money. And then of that, about 18% that we do not collect in the current year, we would expect to receive a substantial amount of that 18% within the first 60 days after year end, because from January through February 28th, we're able to use any collected revenue toward the previous year's expense. But from analysis, we've only received anywhere from $350,000 to $425,000 of that 18% within the first 60 days after year end. So we will only be able to apply that much to our previous year. So it's what I need to say is it's going to take some additional analysis, and we have the next 30 days before adoption to do that. But just in preliminary analysis, a lot of our bigger accounts, bigger tax bills would come from apartment complexes and commercial, and those have periodically or historically been late.
So my thought is that if it's just a matter of getting it like a few months late, it's not that big a deal. If we have to do the reserve, which if it's not getting the money at all and dipping the reserve permanently, then that's more of a concern for me.
So when you're considering using general fund reserve, you have to, according to, generally accepted accounting principles, right? You have to apply revenue and expenditures to the year, to the term that they are applicable to, right? And so if you are replenishing your reserve in a year, in a year outside of, right, the budgeted cycle that these taxes would generally apply to, then, technically, those new funds are just going to pay for old expenditures, right? So if you are consistently depleting your reserve, but you're not doing anything to kind of balance that in your spending or increasing your revenue sources, then you are over time continuing to deplete your general fund reserve. So it's not good practice, let me say that.
Yes, Councilwoman.
Yes, can you tell me, two questions. Can you tell me the balance in our reserves?
Yes, ma'am. Let me say this is, our 2024 is unaudited. Alright, so at, 2023, ending fund balance was about $4.2 million. I can't tell you what 2024 is yet.
Is there any way to estimate that?
Well, I would say yes. We're currently working on reconciliations and cash flow for the 2020, completing the 2024 year, right? If we assume, and I don't like to do that, if we assume that our cash flow, not cash flow, but our revenues and expenditures were in line with the previous year, then we would see, I guess, estimate about a $400,000 increase in fund balance for 2024.
So perhaps 4.6.
Right. But let me say this too, I have yet to determine the impact of any increases in expenditures, like for salaries and positions and things like that. We have yet to determine the impact of that.
Right, and that was my next question is, if we advertise a millage rate that isn't as high as what it would take to actually have a balanced budget, where would you look for the savings that we would need, other than using the reserve, which we're not certain what that will be?
Right. Well, I'm not optimistic about cutting the budget by $1 million in the middle of a budget cycle. So I would lean toward us having to use some amount of fund balance. But ultimately we would, and we have talked about this internally, is put a freeze on any positions that haven't been filled yet, any positions that have gone several cycles without being filled. One of those positions is the assistant city manager position. We're able to use that funding to balance, to help to offset any expenditures in the budget or any revenue shortfall in the budget.
And then we also have like the engineering position too.
I did not see that one separated out in this year's budget.
Okay.
Should I
We do have to, I'm sorry, Mayor, I would like to make just one more point.
Okay.
As we make these decisions, we know that we adopt a mill rate in the middle of a budget cycle each year. We've had some conversation about the potential to change our fiscal year. But also there are several positions that council decided to pay for with ARPA funds, right? And we know that that revenue was a one-time source, right? And so in addition to finding the revenue that we need this year, we need to, consider the fact that we'll have to do the same thing next year, in addition to paying for unfunded positions that, from a revenue source that won't be available anymore.
All right, thank you, and Councilwoman Bell?
Just a point of clarity, thank you. We have a 5.8% differential for the appeals. Okay, and then if we do, I know that in 2014, we had a millage of 21.1%. Same thing, we've been slowly decreasing. But tell me about trends and patterns for the revenue that has been coming in. So we don't have to go back as far as 2024, but just to show the trend and the pattern for us stabilizing the millage rate, but also the hardship that is caused on the budget and which led to this proposed adoption rate.
Right. From what I could tell, let me start with general fund reserve has become increasingly, we're building reserve in good fashion, right? But it seems that we build it just to use it over and over and over again, right? Without, and you will want to, if you're going to use it, you're going to want to use it for some long-term sustainable benefit to the city, right? Not just to pay bills year to year, right? We've seen a decrease in the mill rate, and I think that the increase in valuation is what has really kept us afloat, not just right. And so, at some point, we're going to have to determine how we balance this budget outside of, writing checks that, would come out of our general fund reserve as opposed to some revenue portfolio outside of taxes.
So this is really about sustainability of our budget for the long term, but also balancing, having a real balance.
That's correct.
We haven't had one in quite some time. If we have been retroactively dipping back into the reserve to just keep afloat for the day that they give you a piece, like what I'm hearing.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Council, any comments, questions? All right. With none, I'll open it up to the public. All right, B. Moore.
B. Moore, Raven Trail.
Hey Dean, can you press the button, please, sir? No worries. There we go.
Let's do this. Considering the future anticipation of certain financial crises that I think everybody is aware of, that we see coming, I think it would be advisable to increase the millage rate high enough to make sure we cover the expenses. And if you announce a higher millage rate and then lower it later, that's admissible. But to set it at a lower rate and try to raise it, that's impossible. So I think we need to raise it up and make sure we're covered for the next year or so, and not dip into the general fund. That's what we saw in the past before we had actual public administration by experienced and talented and educated people. And they were dipping in to the tune of $400,000 in the general fund just to cover basic operating costs because they didn't want to raise taxes because they didn't want to get elected. And everybody up here knows that if they send us into a tailspin of some sort, we're not going to get elected, but raising taxes is not the worst thing that can happen. And funding this government, funding this city with all the benefits that we've seen with good government, I think it would be the best thing to do is raise that millage.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Okay, all right. With that, we'll close the public comments out, and you need an answer tonight, correct? Okay, so at this time, I'll take a motion.
We need a form. Are we able to make formal motions that I'm?
Yep, there's a meeting. So I will ask our attorney, just for clarity for everybody, since this is, can we have a formal motion and vote on this tonight? And press the button, I think, you might be okay. Oh, you're okay.
I don't see a button. Yes, this has to be, we have to get the council's consent tonight, so I think the minutes need to reflect that, so you can motion above that.
Then we're not voting on the actual law. We're voting on the advertisement. Right.
Yes, that's correct.
Well, my worry is that the advertisement says to discuss the preliminary digest to consider for advertising. But I don't know if it necessarily put in the agenda that we're voting on. I understand we need to do it tonight, without all that more is that the agenda doesn't say a vote.
Yeah, that's true. We don't have the consensus.
So it says to discuss the 2025 preliminary digest and consider a tentative 2025 mill rate for advertising purposes. So consideration of council is consent.
So for that, just to make sure we're clear, if we all consent to this, is that fine for you? Okay, so we'll just do a
So
consent.
if we can all say that we consent to it, then that can
Okay.
different direction move forward. I just worried about doing a formal vote when you didn't advertise.
Right. So we just have to consent on the amount. That's the thing we need to do tonight.
Correct. Just one more point.
Yes.
Again, the 19.298 mill rate is the rate that is the break-even rate at collections. If you do consent to that 19.298, you are able to reduce the rate after further analysis, and at the pleasure of the council.
So it's 19.1?
298.
298.
Okay.
Yes.
So I just want to be clear. We are just taking into consideration for the adopted amount. We don't have to vote for it to be advertised at all.
That's correct. The city manager just needs direction from the council that she can proceed to advertise for these hearings at that amount.
So she just needs for all of us to agree on the amount, and then next meeting, we'll just do it in a consent. Okay, Councilman Perkins.
And that,
One question before you do the motion.
oh, that, my understanding is we're not doing motion.
We're not doing the motion. He's just
I'm just making a recommendation.
Right.
If I can get a second for my recommendation. No. So to Ms. Miller Thornton's point, I would recommend that we advertise the 19.298 rate, just since it sounds like we're still figuring out where the numbers are, and $1 million is a lot to cut, just to make sure we don't back ourselves into a corner. I think we definitely need to take into consideration the increased tax burden on our residents in the decision, because that's a pretty big jump for some people. But we also want to make sure we don't end up in a tight spot.
I concur.
Okay. So
That's
Councilwoman Hood.
Yes, just to clarify among ourselves and those in the audience, correct me if I'm wrong, our current millage rate is 13.89. That's for 2024. The recommended by our city manager is to go to 15.95 with the assumption that at that rate, and the shortfall in our projected budget can be covered. And then the third one is a rate of 19.298, which is the calculation by the city manager that will balance our budget. So we've got current, a recommended, and then the play it safe 19.298.
All right, so council have, yes.
One more clarification on that. I think Councilwoman Hood brings a good point. So my understanding is that the 19.298 rate assumes that we collect, or, if we only collect 82%, which is about how much we've been collecting historically. So that's to balance the budget at 82%. The 15.9 and some change is if we collected 100%, which historically hasn't been the case. And then I wanted to make one more point too, just in terms of the history of our millage rate. So this, going back to 2014, this isn't as high. I think in 2014 it was 21.11. So now very different mill, calculation in that. But there is, we've continually tried to adjust it based on where the tax revenue has been. So just a little bit of history. I think the more relevant point there is the percentage there. So.
Councilwoman Bill.
One statement here. I know we keep using the word balance, but let's use that loosely. Because if I look at these numbers, even at the 19.298 mil, the overage at the rate that we've been receiving, the 82%, is only $187. That is not a surplus or a balance in no regards, in regards to something that we want to use if we had, an emergency or a crisis, or even if we needed another employee to the team. So I think that the 19.29 is not playing the same, is adequately balancing the budget so that we don't have to continue to dip into our fund balance.
Okay, thank you. So Councilwoman Wood.
Yes. By playing it safe, I meant revenues meeting expenditures. Is there any restriction on the upper limit of our millage rate?
Melon Thornton.
No ma'am, other than being outcast.
Okay. All right, thank you. So right now I have 19.298 as the advertised rate. Is that a consensus of the body? And okay, yes. Councilwoman Bell?
Yes.
Councilman Perkins?
Yes.
Councilman Carroll?
Yes.
Councilwoman Adie? Vice Mayor Johnson?
Yes.
Councilwoman Hood?
Yes.
Okay, there you go. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to the next item, which is to discuss an ordinance to amend the text of the Clarkston zoning ordinance to provide housing for each of the allowed residential housing types. And that would be Mr. Evans.
All right, thank you, Mayor, Council, and City Manager. So on this, staff is recommending different housing typologies for residential uses in the NR1, NR2, and NR3 zoning districts to include single-family detached, accessory dwelling unit, cottage court, duplex, triplex/quadplex, and townhome. And these aren't meant to address any specific lot nor address any development scenarios. These are strictly for visual representation to start discussions, because as a multicultural city, sometimes when I throw the word quadplex or duplex, people don't know what that means. So this is an easy way to show them this is kind of a general understanding of that. And so some things that were discussed with the Planning Commission, in all transparency, I did have a fairly long conversation with Councilwoman Hood today on some of these text amendments. And some things that did come to light is maybe changing the townhouse one on the last page there to say 3 or more dwelling units until we get an official definition into the zoning ordinance. So staff will look at making that change as well. And then the Planning Commission, they did ask for more varieties of different housing types. But at this time, I think staff is willing to put these forward and maybe examine adding more in the future as needed. And with that, Planning Commission did recommend approval unanimously for this text amendment. And I will turn it over to the mayor for any questions.
Okay, thank you. And council, do you have any questions for Mr. Edwards regarding this? Okay. Yes, Councilwoman Hood.
A couple of questions.
Can you please turn your microphone on?
Talking to you.
There you go.
Big green light.
A couple of questions. On the cottage housing development, this states that the units cannot be vertically mixed, meaning you couldn't have single story and two story. What are your thoughts on that?
So on this one, vertically mixed is referring to the dwelling units. So you couldn't have a dwelling unit on top of another dwelling unit. You could do 2 stories for those, is how I've researched and interpreted this.
Okay. So I was misinterpreting vertically mixed. All right. And then our current definition of the common area for cottage housing says that 50% of the units have to face the common area. That would be consistent with this as written, correct?
Yes, ma'am, this shows 100%, so it would be showing an example of something that more than meets the code for this particular example.
Okay. And then my final question on this has to do with the separate driveway. This is for ADUs. If you had a single family home and you wanted to add an ADU in the back, and you didn't have a driveway onto a corner lot, does the definition, the restrictions on ADUs require that the same driveway and access be reached to the ADU, or would it permit having a separate driveway to the ADU for a corner lot?
Yes, ma'am, based on my research, you could have a separate driveway for an ADU. However, the code just does require separate parking for at least 1 car. It does not go into depth of whether another curb cut is required or not. And my understanding of the code also says if you've got 2 frontages, you could potentially be allowed up to 2 curb cuts for a single family home as well.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am?
Yes, so Councilman Carroll and Councilwoman Bell.
So I have a suggestion is that you may want to just add a line saying these are just for demonstrative purposes, because that may resolve some of Councilwoman Hood's questions. Because, you know, the nature of drawing is it can't always be exact. Like if they show a driveway, but a driveway's not required, and they show, you know, a single story when 2 stories also required. So I think if we just say these are for demonstrative and not like a binding edit to what is or isn't allowed, the code is what determines what is or isn't allowed. Maybe just a line in there would, I think, address some of these concerns.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I'll work with the city attorney to get expand on section A for purpose and intent to get that in there.
It's just too hard to draw everything.
Right.
It is.
And Councilwoman Bell?
Thank you. So, Richard, I understand all the work the Planning and Zoning Committee has done. And so with that, the question is, what's the impact from a cost for this changing of labeling? Because that means that every map that we have and every plan that we have associated with the city got to be updated to a degree that we've been using it for funding projects, even the one sitting up here on the wall. So was there any consideration for how much this was going to cost?
I'm not aware of any changes that would need to occur because of that. These are just typologies and images within the code. It has no regulating authority whatsoever.
But it won't. So that map behind you, it won't change the legend at the bottom of it or any other sections of it based off of what's been proposed?
It is my understanding now would be, and I can further discuss that with the city attorney's office between now and next meeting.
Any other comments, questions? All right, we'll open it up to the public. Public once, public twice. All right. With that, can this be on consent? Yes? Yes, Councilman Purdy.
I think so, yeah, just with the recommended changes. This is getting a little into the weeds on the demonstrative thing, but we might just put example if language access is one of the concerns we have, but.
So unfortunately, this cannot go on consent. It does require a public hearing.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, trying to get that one out there.
Yeah.
All right, we got that one. Thank you. I know, thank you.
It's great work.
Okay, good. So just stay on up there. To discuss and C, which is to discuss an ordinance to amend the Clarkston zoning ordinance to add definitions and use regulations for child daycare, adult daycare, convenience stores, grocery stores, fitness centers, and small food retail. Mr. Edwards.
All right, thank you, Mayor and Council and City Manager. So on this one, a bit of background, Planning Commission did provide a recommendation for this one at their meeting last Tuesday, but they did not provide a recommendation for convenience stores, and they have asked that to come back before them for their one deferral that they can make. So staff has re-advertised that one, and that will come back before you at a later date.
Okay. So we'll wait till they do that and they'll.
Just for convenience stores, they recommended approval for the rest of them, so we're just gonna remove convenience stores from this packet. We did not have time to do that since the meetings are only a week apart.
Okay.
But I can go through the rest of the recommended changes on this one.
Okay.
So has it already been advertised with convenience stores or without?
It was advertised with convenience stores, so you're welcome to discuss it, you're welcome to open it up to the public, but it's separate. We are requiring a separate public hearing.
But they'll just ultimately have to be taken out if it passes.
Yes. All right, so on this one, to start off with, child daycare / adult daycare, it is listed on the use table, and it is not listed on the use table, but it does have a conditional use section, but it's not allowed on any of our property. So staff wanted to go in and make sure there was a list of properties where you could effectively use these child daycare and adult daycares within the city. And we are recommending permitting them in the NC1, NC2, Town Center, NRCD, and RC zoning districts. And with that, we have updated the use table as I provided to you today. Those zoning districts do align with what already is for at-home daycares. So that's where that recommendation is coming from. And Planning Commission also recommended on this one adding a PA, which is allowed pursuant to an accessory use for the NR1, NR2, and NR3 zoning districts, as those are already allowed within the supplemental regulations of section 407.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, so are you talking about the allowed by accessory structure, accessory use, I'm sorry?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it would be a PA for NR1, NR2, and NR3. And those regulations can be found in section 407 of the existing code. All right, next as part of this text amendment, we're recommending adding a definition in use for fitness centers. And currently staff is recommending fitness centers 50,000 square feet or less to be permitted in NC1, NC2, TCI, NRCD, and RC zoning districts. These would be your smaller gym and fitness centers, kind of like an Orange Theory or an F45, so we do allow them in more places. And then we've broken it out to recommend fitness center over 50,000 square feet to be permitted in the NC2 and I zoning districts with conditional use permit requirements for the NRCD zoning district, in case there would want to be a mixed-use project with a gym as the anchor. And we would define fitness center as a building or portion of a building designed and equipped for the conduct of sports, exercise, and related leisure activities, or other customary and usual recreational activities operating for profit or not for profit, and which may be open only to bona fide members and their guests or open to the public for a fee. Accessory uses which support the principal use may include therapy treatments such as massage, meditation, and other healing arts. The term fitness center shall not include adult entertainment establishment, hospitals, or other professional healthcare establishments separately licensed as by the state of Georgia. And the next section here, the current code doesn't really address our food marts, so they're either defined as a convenience store or a grocery store, and I think those can be misleading labels for a lot of what our ethnic and multicultural resource shops are. So we are recommending small food retail, which would be defined as a retail business less than 5,000 square feet in size that sells a curated selection of fresh and prepackaged food, and which includes the preparation of fresh foods for on-site or off-site consumption. And staff is recommending that those be allowed in the NC2 and TC zoning districts. And lastly, we are recommending that grocery store Update the definition of grocery store to be a store that is 10,000 square feet or more, where most of the floor area is devoted to the sale of food products for home preparation and consumption, which typically also offer other home care and personal care products. And we are recommending requiring a conditional use permit in the TC and NRCD zoning districts and allowing by right in the NC2 zoning district. And with that, I will turn it back over to the mayor and council for any questions.
Okay, so we only have the convenience store that they have to add to it.
Yes, so the convenience store will come back as a separate text amendment.
Okay. Council, you had questions about this? Councilwoman Hood?
Yes, thank you. Richard, I think on the updated list that you gave us this evening, the grocery store information, can you go over that again? All I'm seeing is that a P under NC2.
Yeah, and then it would also be a C for TC and NRCD. I think that was an error on my part. I
Okay.
do apologize.
So conditional under town center and NRC.
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
Right. And what about NC2?
NC2 would be a P for permitting.
Okay. I have a question, as you know, we discussed this, the small food retail. And I know that the convenience store is going to be looked at again. And we discussed the minimal difference between a small food retail and our current definition of convenience store. Can you go into a bit more detail about what the small food retail is and is not, and how it relates to a grocery store and how it might relate to a convenience store? Many of our businesses in Clarkston have a lot of different things that they provide. Some prepare food and you can't eat it there. I think you buy it and take it away. But they also have other things that they sell at the same time, ingredients and maybe even non-food items. So can you help us understand the distinction between those three?
Yes, ma'am. So some background on the small food retail. This came with some research because I know we've discussed a lot that a lot of times our multicultural ethnic stores are being considered grocery stores or convenience stores, and it doesn't appear that they really fall under a clear definition of either of those. So in my research, I found that the city of Baltimore, Maryland did really good research on their bodega culture and how they were able to figure out how to keep the bodegas in the neighborhoods without considering them convenience stores or grocery stores. So that's kind of the background of the research I did. So the small food retail would be allowed up to 5,000 square feet, which is larger than a convenience store. And it would require that they sell prepared and fresh and prepackaged foods at the site, whereas the proposed definition of convenience store would not allow for the fresh food option there, fresh prepared food as there. So the small food retail would be allowed to cook and serve on site without being like a full-blown restaurant. However, their permitting would still be as a restaurant, but it would allow them to serve any type of food in there they'd want, while also selling other food that pre-curated food that they would like in there.
And then a grocery store?
Yep, and I think with that, I mean, if you're selling fresh food on-site and off-site and prepackaged foods, I think there is some leeway in there to allow for a small section of maybe home goods and stuff like that, but we need to update that definition based on the conversations we had to make sure that is clear.
And then the convenience store.
Yeah, and
No, but she's trying to understand because it's gonna be working.
Where do you think the convenience store definition will come down?
yeah, so through our research, we found we defined convenience stores two different ways in our code. The zoning ordinance and the business licensing ordinance has it two different. So based on what we prepared for you, the definition for a convenience store, to make sure it matches, is any retail establishment offering sell prepackaged food products, household items, and other goods commonly associated with the same, and having a gross floor area of not greater than 2,700 square feet. That is an update to go in line with the business licensing section, as the zoning ordinance does say 2,000 square feet or less. And with that, I think the convenience store is more along the lines of, you also sell household items and other goods commonly associated with the same, meaning you've got cleaning products, you've got maybe some hair supplies, maybe little things like that you would find around your house, whereas a small food retail would not necessarily have those items.
Councilman Perkins?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Edwards, so just to clarify on the small food retail, and I have the same question on small food retail being able to sell household goods. I know a lot of our businesses do kind of fit that bodega. If you have a bodega, you can get a sandwich or a screwdriver if you need to, and some hardware parts.
Hubcaps.
Yeah, hubcaps. Sure. And so I know if we could expand that definition just to make sure it does capture what some of our businesses are doing. I think that could work. One question I had around the curated selection of fresh and prepackaged foods. Would a small food retail be able to sell, like if they wanted to have a produce section, or somebody could go pick up a gallon of milk, things like that? Is that included in that, or do we need to expand the definition to include things like that?
No, I think this would definitely fall under kind of like a market like that you're speaking of, because we don't technically define that anywhere outside of our temporary uses. So I think something like that could fall under this definition as well, as long as there's fresh and packaged foods there.
Mm-hmm.
And then one more follow-up. I love what y'all did with the just the example drawings of houses. I don't think we'd necessarily want to have this by next week, but would it be, do you have a timeline on maybe putting some examples, just kind of illustrate, here's a couple of examples of what this could look like, just for folks who are wanting to start a business or interested in, maybe expanding an existing business, have some ideas in terms of what they can do with this.
Yeah, we could definitely look into getting some graphics drawn for something like that to go along with some of our commercial uses as well.
Yeah, it could be graphics. I'm thinking just a simple explainer. Here's an example of things you might sell, just to give people just something a little more tangible than the language the code itself. So,
Thank you. Any questions?
Just to finish my remarks.
Okay.
As the small food stands now, and however the convenience store comes out, to me it's very confusing, and I think we need to expand and get more detailed, because depending on who is enforcing this, or depending on what a business person might want to open a new business and say, I want to be a small food retail, and then they decide to sell something that doesn't strictly fit that definition. I just think these three definitions need to work together and be explicit enough for the public to understand and for code enforcement to understand.
Okay, with that, Councilwoman Young.
Number two, I'm slightly perplexed. And the reason being is we've done these text amendments on and off for quite some time. We compare what was on applications to what we approved. And I just want to know, when I'm reading, and I read what you put in the staff report a couple weeks ago in regards to consistency, clarity, but also ensuring that the businesses that currently operate under these also understand what does that mean. And so was there any pre-work that was done with them to kind of go back and make sure that these definitions, there are no unintended consequences or changes that we'll have to make in the future, because you got community input and some of the business input to develop these definitions before, as y'all were going through the planning and zoning, or just walk me through that process.
Yeah, a lot of this research came out of the existing issues we found with the current businesses. A lot of them do sometimes change business names. You know, lots of you do a business name or a property change, owner to change. They think to do the whole process again. So I've probably gone through 10 to 15 of these in my 6 months here with business owners where it's like, well, what are you selling more of? Are you selling more food? Are you selling more prepackaged goods? And just trying to figure out a way to classify them, one that fits in with zoning and being able to correctly zone them, but also looking at like what fits in with the business licensing process as well, because they do have a American Institute of Business Licensing code names. I can't think of it off the top of my head right now. So kind of making sure it coincides with that a little bit, as well as zoning. So that's where most of the background of this came through, and then public engagement planning commission. However, if y'all would like to see something like this go out to the public more, we're happy to do that and do some research with, maybe we could even partner with the DDA to see if they can reach out to some businesses and get more information on that.
So definitely I'd like to see that.
Yeah.
I definitely want the community to advise us how they operate as a business, so we don't continue to have those issues. Because I'm sure in the past, when we made definitions for the type of business that we had, it was to develop some consistency there. But it looked like over time, like there's still, it hasn't been enough clarity, right? And I would rather co-design and co-create this with the current businesses so we don't have these issues for the future. So I do think that there needs to be some community engagement. I mean, outside of planning and zoning meetings, right? I know that there's a small subset of individuals that come to that, but that doesn't supersede the folks that we're trying to provide clarity to that are in our business community. And I hope that my colleagues also agree with that.
Yes, ma'am, I'm happy to do that.
Okay, council? Make sure in terms of that, if there's something the body wishes to do. Because we're not in a rush to get this done, right? Okay.
It seems like there are some things we could move forward on, like the fitness centers and things like that, and then maybe hold off on ones that we need more definition on. I don't think we need to pause the whole thing.
Right.
But we could pause that part of it.
I have a question.
Well, wait a minute. Yeah, finish and we'll let you go.
Yeah, I would say the only one that I would request a faster paced movement on is the adult daycares and child daycares. Because we do have people asking me about those and they're not allowed anywhere in the city currently as a primary use.
Right, like that, the fitness center, that type of thing, I think we could, there's no controversy. I'm forward with that.
Yes, we can talk about that next week at our hearing when we do that. Yes, Councilman Perkins.
Thank you. So I did have a question on to your knowledge, would the change for the small food retail, would that affect any existing, I guess I'm looking at, would it cause someone to have to shut down or go through some additional administrative burden if we made that change now? Or is it just sounds like it's creating a pathway so that people don't have to do that based on your past experience?
Yeah, and I think with the current definition on essentially what was happening, if you had a food retail type business and you were over 2,000 square feet, you were considered a grocery store. And if you were under, you were considered a convenience store. So that's typically how it's been done. I don't think this would make anything non-conforming. The very few that may have a space between 5,000 and 10,000 square feet, which we don't have many of those retail spaces along most of our downtown and the districts where these are going. So I think it would be very few, if any at all, that would be considered non-conforming for this. But they would have no change in their current business. If they're licensed and properly licensed currently, then it would have no effect on their current business.
Okay.
So I think in light of that, so we maybe even consider including that in it, just to kind of keep moving forward, because this is going to reset the cycle, for that. We can always go back and make some adjustments. And I would also recommend there's a number of business service providers, there's some like tax prep providers, things like that. They are great. They already have the relationships with existing businesses at a very technical level. And those are the people I hear from a lot. It's like, hey, these definitions don't make sense. So I'm happy, I'm sure my colleagues also have connections there. We'd be happy to connect you. I think they'd love to have another level of conversations on some of these and help inform the process to moving forward.
Yeah, definitely. If you have any connections, feel free to reach out. I'm still new to the community and learning.
Yeah.
So I do rely on y'all and the DDA and other members of the community to make those connections. So I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Yes, Councilman Vice Mayor Johnson.
My question is about adult daycares. You said that there was an urgency there because of demand. Can you elaborate a little bit
We
If we don't
don't
allow
know
them, right?
specifically, about 2 months ago, we did have an inquiry about someone doing that. However, when I reviewed the use table, it was not allowed in any zoning district. It would only be allowed as accessory use in certain zoning districts.
Okay, and with that being said, I don't know what the process is when you're working on these text amendments, but for us to get this tonight and it has an urgency and we're in the final stages, I think the process may need to be tweaked a little bit.
Yeah, and the city manager and I have already discussed that because we think this process is too fast. We initiated text amendment with the Planning and Zoning Commission, and then 2 weeks later, we have it for a final vote. So we have discussed changing that procedure to where if this Planning and Zoning Commission got it this month, you wouldn't get it till the end of the following month. So that gives plenty of time for public to ask me questions and for you all to provide me further feedback after the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Mhm. Any other comments or questions at this time? Yes, Councilwoman Bell.
So Richard, of course, got no question. So I hear the urgency and I hear that, there's interest, but has I see the attorney been consulting in regards to these adult daycares? No, they're not allowable right now. However, there's some liability concerns that I have when I think about adult daycare, and those type of centers, and was that taken into consideration?
So I did work with the city attorney. Once I review these before I even send them to the planning commission, I do have the attorney's office look at it. I think my interpretation is we can allow them in the zoning code, but they are regulated by the state, which has strict regulations. And we can ask Ms. Laura if she's got any further comments on that as well.
I do not. We did work with Richard in reviewing the proposed text amendment from a zoning perspective, which is really just, consistency with the code, making sure we're not running afoul of state law with any of these proposed changes. But what I think I hear you saying is a different concern. And so that's not something that we looked at.
Yes, okay.
That's my concern. We get these text amendments and we haven't holistically looked at the impact that it's going to have. And we move forward with text amendments that cause us long-term issues further down the line. We got half of the input from the folks in the community, and then we have an incident, and we only thought about it from a placemaking, location perspective. We didn't see the full picture. So for me, right, well, of course I want more community input on these changes. So I want to make sure it's clear there across the board. And then the other thing I want to make sure the unintended consequences and the impact that's from a risk and a liability perspective that it's going to have for us as we move into this motion of making this a liability. That makes sense.
And thank you, Councilwoman Bell. And that also goes to Vice Mayor Johnson's comment about this going too quickly in terms of us just finding out about it and wanting to make a decision next week. So,
We'll have changes coming to you on those issues soon.
okay, thank you. So with that, I heard a couple things. One, beyond us just having to meet at the hearing next week, but to still have the opportunity to have more community input. Because while you may have had inquiries about adult care, there's not an urgency to have it in place. Is that correct?
Not from the city standpoint, no, we've gotten multiple inquiries about it, so based on citizens asking for it, I thought I would bring it forward.
Okay, thank you. So at this time, I'll open it up for the public. Public?
Remember, we're slow walker.
I know.
Sorry. I'm getting faster than you. Look how fast I am. Okay. I'm Debbie Gaffin. Is it gonna make that weird sound if I'm moving?
No.
Okay, I'm Debbie Gaffin on Mill Avenue. I have 3 questions. Number 1 is child daycare going to include family home daycare, which is 6 or under, a number of 6 children or under. That's my question, number 1. Number 2, my second question is, would it be easier if we had examples of places like, let me see, small food retail, a pizza place, where you get the pizza and you take it out. A takeout pizza place, would that be a small food retailer? Because they're not selling anything but pizza and maybe Coke, soda, let's say soda. So I think what I read the whole packet, because you know how I am. I read every single thing, and I kept thinking to myself, so what is Dollar General? Is that a convenience store? They started selling some prepackaged food. They sell frozen food, they sell some fresh. They sell everything but hubcaps. They sell medicine. Are they a convenience store? Or what are they? I mean, if we had some definition, if we had some examples, we'd know kind of what we're talking about. The same thing with, well, the small food retail, the convenience store, and the grocery stores, it seems to be size is the whole big issue. And what they sell feels weird to me because, like you said, they could change what they're selling. Like, is Subway a restaurant or is Subway a small food retailer? I don't know. I mean, they make it there, but they're not selling hubcaps or, Tylenol. So I think maybe if we had examples, I would have understood. I read it really carefully, and I was in Susan's boat. I was like, what is small retail? What would that be? Like, I noticed that my gas station sells fried chicken. That feels weird to me. And I've never bought that fried chicken. It may be very delicious, but I find it hard to believe that it helps checking out my gas station for fried chicken, because frying food has a lot of implications. There's the grease trap issue. There's how long is that food sitting in the case? I mean, it feels like there's a lot going on there. And I've always been startled and wondered how come that was allowed. I get why QT can sell hot dogs, but I don't get how Texaco can sell fried chicken. That's bigger. That feels bigger in the cooking world to me. Those are the two things. The last question I have is, sorry.
I'll never know.
The question out.
I'll stop. But sometimes it feels weird that we're thinking about a fitness center when we don't have a recreation center.
Okay,
So I feel sad for us.
thank you. Any other public comments? Okay, so we'll have this as a hearing next week for us to discuss further. Okay. And then that, Mr. Edwards, D, which is to discuss an ordinance to amend the Clarkston zoning ordinance to provide architectural design requirements for residential garages and carports and to provide building elevation requirements.
All right, thank you, Mayor, Council, and City Manager. So on this one, some background on it, the design guidelines that the Planning and Zoning Commission was reviewing to potentially adopt. When I did a full review of those design guidelines, this was the only piece that wasn't already codified within our current zoning code. So I decided that I would bring it forward to the Planning and Zoning Commission and further to you all. So with this text amendment here, the first piece of this, building elevations of residential structures shall not be repeated at a rate greater than once every 5 building lots or units along the same street frontage to minimize the monotonous appearance of residential development. Any residential subdivision, townhome, or condominium development shall be required to submit a copy of their approved plat or site plan denoting or identifying model names or architectural elevations that demonstrates compliance with this section. So that last piece is referencing any new ones that decide to come in for full development review. And on this, we already have very similar regulations for our commercial buildings. And this is a very similar regulation that a lot of our neighboring jurisdictions have as well, just to make sure you're not getting the same looking house every lot. And I think with Clarkston, we are very lucky to have a lot of historic homes. And the builders back in the 60s and 70s did not just build die-cast. So we don't foresee any issues within our existing subdivisions, as most of those homes do have very different architectural elevations. But however, any new development coming in would have to meet these, and we'd like to make sure that not all of them look exactly the same, like some developments we've seen in other places. The second part of this is staff is proposing to add the following language to the code relating to residential garage and carports. It'd be one, all residential garages and carports facing a street shall not be located closer to the street than the dwelling's primary facade. And two, residential garages and carports facing a street shall not be comprised of more than 50% of the front facade. So on this is just saying the garage cannot be in front of the front elevation of the home, and that it can't be more than 50% of the front facade. This may require them to add an additional story on top. Maybe they do an extra ceiling height on the second floor of the housing. So it's not disallowing front-facing garages, it's just saying it can't be 50%. And a lot of this research does come out of, I always get this acronym messed up, so I printed it out. It's called Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design. And their top thing is natural surveillance, which is designing homes and neighborhoods with good visibility from within the building to the surrounding areas can deter crime. So a lot of times this does come down to a little bit of crime prevention in residential neighborhoods. And the example I shared with the Planning and Zoning Commission, I was at Congress for New Urbanism meeting several years back, and the demonstrator said this to us. It's like, if you have the snap houses, which you've got garages that jut out 10 to 15 feet in front of the front door, and you're out trick-or-treating in your neighborhood, would you let your kid walk up to that front door alone? And most respondents did say they may not be comfortable doing that. So I think a lot of this does come down to deterring crime and the feeling of safety within neighborhoods. So that's kind of the background of where these types of meetings did come from. And with that, I will turn it back over to the mayor and the council for any questions.
Okay, Council, do we have any questions? Councilwoman Hood.
Yes, thank you. Richard, would you define for everybody in the room the term elevations? Because many people might think it refers to the height of a building.
Yes, so the term architectural elevations is essentially the building material that the architect uses to design the house. So architectural elevation includes different types of front porches, stoops, materials. You can even use shutters to make the architectural elevations different. So it can be any of the architectural features on the front of the home.
And it refers to how the home looks.
Yes, ma'am, that is
Not
correct.
whether it's 1 story or 2 story or anything else, just.
Yes, the elevations are strictly aesthetic.
Thank you. We discussed at length the width of existing lots in our single-family districts, and some of the, in order to meet the not exceeding 50% of the frontage of the elevation for a 2-car garage, which a lot of people want. You would not be able to get that on the smaller width lots, and your response was they go up. So, and then the possibility would be if the lot's wide enough, they can have a driveway that goes down the side of the house to a double garage that is on the side rather than the front.
Yes, ma'am, that is correct. So this text amendment would only apply to redeveloped homes or new homes. So I think there is a situation where if somebody wanted to come in and do 5,000 square foot lots in the NR3 zoning district, they may have a tough time with design. They may have to increase their lot sizes slightly or go vertical with their design. So there's a possibility that it could require larger lot sizes in some zoning districts potentially.
Okay. All right, any questions? Yes,
So-
Councilman Carey.
So one concern I have besides the same lot size concern is also, I don't know how this would work for townhomes, because if a townhome has a 2-car garage, that's a lot of the frontage, maybe more than 50%, because usually townhomes are pretty narrow. So I can understand how it would work for single family homes, but it seems like it would be a tougher fit for condos or townhomes.
Yeah, and with that, essentially kind of like what I was saying, if you've got 10-foot height for your garage and you do 12-foot for your first level, you easily meet this requirement. Just by increasing ceiling height by a foot, half a foot, whatever you need to, it could meet this requirement fairly easy.
It would have to be, like, if the first floor has the garage, and then it usually has like a narrow door, you're saying it would have to have, what, 2 stories above that in order to meet
No, you can even have one story. I mean, even if the garage takes up 49.5% of the front facade and the second level and the sides take up 50.5, you could still meet this. And a lot of design features that I've seen that would help meet this, so a lot of times they'll put like a column separating the two garage doors and you have two separate garage doors. Sometimes that's a way to go to meet this. And a lot of times it's just larger ceiling heights on the second floor or finding ways to reduce the size of the garages.
Any other comments? All right. Any from the public? All right, this is also a hearing. And finally, to discuss an ordinance to amend the Clarkston zoning ordinance to require a mix of land uses with projects in the town center TC zoning district for parcels over 1/2 acre in size. Mr. Edwards.
All right, thank you, Madam Mayor, Council, and City Manager. So on this one, staff is requesting a text amendment to require the mix of use land for town center zone district properties with over 1/2 acre in size. And so on this one, currently there are 16 parcels within the town center zoning district that are a minimum of 1/2 acre or 21,780 square feet in size. So if these parcels were to be developed and they're currently vacant or redeveloped that would exceed 50% of the assessed value, then they would have to come up to this code, which would require them to pick 3 of the 4 land use mix options, which are residential, institutional and cultural, commercial and retail, and office. So on this, with my discussions with Councilwoman Hood today, I decided to bring an example forward to kind of explain how this would work. So for example, if you had a 1/2 acre lot, which is the 21,780 square feet, and you decided to do 50% residential, that means 10,890 square feet would have to be solely for residential. But then you could break out 10% for institutional, which for example could potentially be a daycare or it could be a park in green space. And that would just be required 2,178 square feet for that. And then the remaining 40% would have to be commercial or office at 8,712 square feet. This is definitely the smallest you could do this type of project based on the requirement here. And most of the research I've done, a lot of cities, Douglasville and Alpharetta were the 2 I used mostly for this research. So if like Douglasville is close to our size and our demographics, and Alpharetta has done their downtown extremely well, winning many awards. And both of them actually require stuff like this throughout their whole downtown district. So I think we do have a bunch of restaurants and uses that are on smaller feature lots that are doing fine, and I don't think they necessarily need to come up to this requirement because mixed use can be tough on something smaller than 1/2 acre. So I did choose the 1/2 acre for that reason solely there. And with that, on this one, the Planning Commission did recommend approval 4-0 on this one as well. And with that, I will turn it over to you for questions.
Okay. Council, any questions or comments?
Okay.
All right, Councilwoman Hood.
Yes. This is an instance where I think it would be very helpful to have graphics to illustrate a 1/2 acre lot and go by these percentages of the different kinds of uses and showing how that would work. Again, when we discussed this, 1/2 acre is not very big. And put 3 different uses plus the driveways and parking. And again, you mentioned that may require going up, but I think it'd be helpful for me and probably others to see a graphic of how that could be done. Because it's very hard to grasp when you're just talking about square footage and percentage of use and that sort of thing.
And I can look at the same internet, but we do not have that software. We probably have to get a third party to come in and help us with that, but I can work with her to see.
Okay. Councilman Carroll?
My suggestion might be to increase it to over 1/2 acre, because I think at 1/2 acre, it's hard to fit 3 different uses in. Like for some of these lots, they're not that big. It might just be 1 grocery store or 1 convenience store, is all that would fit in the lot. And if you say you have to build a convenience store and you have to build housing and you have to also a park, you're just probably gonna say, all right, I'm not gonna do anything with that lot then. So I think that it's just too much of a burden to the downtown development, saying you have to use all 3 uses and just half an acre, maybe 2 acres. Then I think that could be more people, but half an acre, I think it's just too small. And I think would ultimately, I know, understand the desire for mixed use, I love mixed use. But I think that ultimately would deter development more than encourage it. That's what it was.
Any other comments, Councilman Perkins?
Thank you, Mayor. That is somewhat concerned. And so I'm wondering if maybe Councilman for Carroll's point, maybe we come back to this and create some tiers. So maybe half acre to 0.75 acres and just making stuff up. So put this in that box. You're only required to have 2 different uses, and then, you kind of scale it up as the lot size gets bigger. Yeah, I agree that you should have concern.
Any other comments? Public? Okay, thank you. We'll have that next week too. And don't go that far, Richard. We'll have F, which is to discuss an ordinance to increase the number of Historic Preservation Commission HPC members from 3 to 5, to remove term limits for HPC members, and to require advertising of opportunities to apply to serve as a member of the HPC.
Thank you, Mayor and Council and City Manager. So on this one, we are recommending expanding the HPC membership from 3 to 5 members, because currently a quorum is 2 at the 3 members. So the HPC cannot do anything together whatsoever without being in a quorum, and thus requiring notifications. We did post a sign at Georgia State University in downtown one time for a presentation, just because we had to do it for them to be able to see a presentation from Georgia State students. So I think expanding that with the upcoming Historic Resources Survey project that we're going to take on, so where at least 2 of the members can go out and survey houses together, I think it'll be very beneficial. And further on this, the current requirements say that the members cannot serve more than 2 concurrent terms without having to miss a term before coming back to you all for an appointment. So we are recommending that that be taken out of the regulations. And then there be a requirement that all postings have to go up for 30 days on the city website to advertise for any vacancy that comes up. So if you could do 2 in a row, even if your first one comes up, we'd advertise for 30 days, then bring it to you all for a vote. And then I put the member roster in here for what that would look like with the additional 2 members based on their terms and their appointment times. And with that, I will turn it over to you all for any questions or concerns.
Okay, council, at this time, any questions or concern, Vice Mayor Johnson?
I have a question about no term limits. When you did your research, was that common in other jurisdictions not to have a cutoff or a 5-year, 4-year term limit for HPC?
I think it is fairly common that like Planning and Zoning Commission and HPC don't typically have a term limit, as those boards are appointed by this board, so their term limit can be, we decided not to reappoint you and we have another qualified candidate. So that's how most cities do look at this.
Okay.
Based on my research and the cities I've worked with, I can't speak for all.
Councilwoman Bell?
Well, to Vice Mayor's point, right, we have a different challenge here, right? We don't get 1,000 applicants that come to us for the agency. So it's really just appointing who all is left and who are. Now, I understand that extension, add more members to it, that's fine. But I do think that we need to have some term limits. I mean, planners only have a lot of power, you have a lot of people, right? They're going out and evaluating things for historic preservation fire. I do think there need to be more members, but I don't know about the term limit.
Well, to that point, in my research, by the time they start a project, 5 years has gone by.
Yeah.
Because it's not a touch and go project. You can't, if half of them, 5 years would be not enough. So I was just trying to see if we were being consistent with other jurisdictions, because I've done the research. You can't do anything historic preservation in 2 years without passing it to somebody else to finish.
Any other comment? Okay. Public? Public. Come on. Former councilman HPC person, Moore.
Dean Moore, Chairman of the Historic Preservation Commission, for Trail. Yeah, this commission is formed by the basic requirements. It says, I think what planning says at least 3 members. So we have 3 members. And that's when we run into problems of trying to get research together, have discussions together. We need more people. Also, a lot of our apartment buildings are coming into the qualification for historic preservation. 2 projects we've worked with Georgia State. A lot of interest out there, so I'm hoping that we get more members to actually branch off and specialize in different things as we go forward with this. So I encourage you to go ahead and vote for that. The term limits, as Vice Mayor pointed out, these things don't happen overnight. Sometimes you have to go in the battle and put things back and put them away. It takes a lot of time to do these things. So, thank you for in advance for voting.
Thank you. Any other public? All right, with that, well, we here for this one, do we? Okay. Leslie, yes, Councilwoman Bell. All right, well, at this point, it's either do you want it on consent or?
No.
Okay, then that's not, we'll see you next week. All right. And we'll move on to, yeah, for F, well, that'll be a regular item. And then we'll move to G, which is to discuss an ordinance to amend the city charter to be consistent with the state general law concerning the minimum term of municipal court judges. And we have our guest counsel. Ms. Moore?
Yes, there was a change in the state general law to the municipal judge's term. It's now 2 years. And that's what our municipal court judge has been appointed for, a 2-year term, so we are complying with the law. But the city charter said 1 year, and that language was held over from the prior state law. So this item is just to update the city charter so that we're in compliance on paper with the general state law.
Any questions on this one? All right, can this be consent? Okay, thank you. All right, no public. All right, thank you. All right. We'll go to H. Mr. Duncan, I'm asked to discuss a resolution approving a purchase agreement with Musco Sports Lighting LLC for the installation of a field lights at the soccer field at Milam Park and committing $100,000 in matching funds from SPLOST 2 from the Atlanta United GA 100 pitch grant.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, City Manager. Yes, I'm presenting to you the purchase agreement for Musco Lighting for the lights, improvement of our soccer field, upfield for installing our lights. Working with our procurement consultant, Willis Moody, we were able to go on to our state Sourcewell, our state contractor, and find Musco Lighting to be our contractor. By going through Sourcewell, we didn't have to go through the RFP bidding, and so we were able to invite Musco Lighting out to do the assessment, and they came back with the purchase agreement that you have, and that it would take about 8 weeks once the contract is approved for them to be able to order the equipment, and then 2 to 3 weeks to install. So we're looking at, if the contract is approved now, we're looking to have this project done by middle of August, early September. And the contract is for $181,000. $1,500. And that's within the grant that we had to match at $100,000.
Okay. Any questions at this time? Councilwoman Hood? Yeah, oh, okay, we'll let Vice Mayor Johnson go.
Just to be clear, this is the upper field or the lower field?
The upper field.
Upper field. And are you pleased, were there anything that you were looking for that they did not do? Or
No.
they conformed to all of your demands?
It conformed to everything.
Okay.
All right, Councilwoman Hood?
Yes, can you repeat why this did not go out for bids?
Because we went on state contractor under Sourcewell, which is the state contract. And so the vendors that are on the state contract already went through the bidding process. So we were able to go right to the state contract. We could find a vendor, and if we select a vendor, then we don't have to go through our
Were there more than one vendors who, on that state contract, who could do this kind of work?
Yes, there is, but we chose Musco Lighting because Musco Lighting has done projects with the Georgia Pitch in the past. And so we went with a contractor that's familiar with the work that we wanted to get done in installing the lights on the field. So they have worked with several agencies that were awarded the Georgia Pitch grant.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Any questions or comments from the public? All right, can you let me, yes.
Did we determine whether we would be responsible for the $100,000 or the $81,000? If our match is 100 to 100, what are we determining will happen with the additional 18.5?
Yeah, I reached out to the funder and haven't had a response yet on which one we will be responsible for as of yet. So I'm hoping that I have to do a monthly report this week. So I'm hoping that once I do the report, that they will respond back to me.
We'll update Mayor Council with that.
Thank you. Thank you. Because to your point, we did get $100,000 grant. So, let's see what we can do. Okay, thank you all. With that, can this be consent? Okay, all right, we'll move to I.
Excuse me, Mayor Burks, can I make a
Yes.
comment about 6G? Did you say that one was consent as well?
6G.
Yes, ma'am.
Because that one has a 2 adoption requirement.
Oh, it does?
Yes,
Okay.
I just wanted to note that.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, and I. And that is to discuss the request to use the council chambers courtroom located at 3921 Church Street, Clarkston, Georgia 30021 as a temporary location for the Parks and Recreation Center. Mr. W.
So, as you know, Parks and Recreation is a little over a year old. And so we currently do not have any inside facility to be able to conduct any programs or classes or meetings of that sort. So, came up with the idea and we were searching around looking for some places that since we were moving from this building, that possibly this room here would be available for Parks and Recreation to utilize for classes, programs, and etc. Now, it wasn't, I guess let me clarify, it wasn't the use of the whole building. It was just this room and the front lobby area to be used. Downstairs was not part of the request, so I want to make sure, I don't think that was noted on the summary, but just this area here in the front lobby so we can use for classes. While we go through the park master plan, and in the park master plan, hopefully we can identify some other areas that we might be able to utilize. But this was just a temporary thing, so we could have some inside use for classes, programs, meetings, etc.
Vice Mayor Johnson.
Are you aware of the history of why we're leaving this building?
I am, that's why we only requested the top area. From my understanding, I think the bottom area was area of issues.
Well, not to be overly graphic, but once the building is not completely occupied, all of the non-paying residents here are going to expand their horizon. So, do you have a time frame of about how long you were trying to use it?
At least, I know our park master plan runs until the end of the year. So I was hoping at least to then, and then that way we could make another assessment once we go through the master plan and possibly identify other areas for location. But just, it was really temporary just to get us going with some classes.
I think, City Manager, did you have a comment? I thought I saw you say something. Okay, thank you.
I'll finish.
Go ahead, you finish and then.
Have you
Councilwoman Bell.
spoken with administration to see if there's any potential space where you're going that could be utilized? Because we were told that we had a couple of 1,000 square feet that was still available if it had not been designated.
I didn't go that far as I.
This was your, you
Yeah, this was-
found something, you put your eye on it and you stayed there. Okay.
All right, Christopher Columbus, stay, all right. Councilwoman Bell.
Well, I don't care where you be placed. When you place it, I don't know why we need to approve this though. I think admin can approve this. You can come on over here and use them whenever you want to. As long as you know what's under there. And even if you don't know, if you have a class and people show up, they got parking spots. I don't care.
Yeah, I kind of feel like it's an admin decision if you want to use this room. I don't think this is something the council needs to say yes or no to.
Well, doing that.
I know, I appreciate you bringing it to us. I'm just saying, these are kind of things that we don't mind you just, you make the decision which room fits best for you.
We do appreciate that. One of the considerations we have for bringing it before you all is the fact that we are repurposing a city asset, right? And so, if you all have consented that the authority lies within administration, then we'll be glad to make those determinations. What I do want to do, Mr. Duncan, and we can have this conversation offline, is just to do an assessment of the space with what you're actually wanting to do. And if we do have the availability of space over at our new location to have classes, I know we have several conference areas and one GMA style classroom that might be more suitable, but we will talk through that.
Councilwoman Hood.
Yes, if the administrative decision was to use this space, would you use it as is, or would you have to incur expenses to change out this?
Pretty much as it is, just, clearing out just the benches and maybe voting. And
So, but then if you're gonna have classes, would you need to buy chairs to replace?
we have chairs that is stored at Mount Park, so yeah.
And again, I agree this is an administrative decision, I'm just wondering if there are associated costs. Thank you.
Just make sure we take care of our other friends too. Okay, all right, thank you. With that, we'll leave that to administrate. Is that fine for everyone? Okay, so I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, it's been properly moved and seconded that we adjourn the meeting. All in favor say aye. Aye. All right, meeting adjourned. See you next week. Thank you all.
The recording has stopped.
Like,